Did you ever wonder why we make so much fuss about light in film and video? Well, the obvious reason is that without light, you can't see anything and you don't have an image. But in today's world, there's usually light almost everywhere, even at night. And today's low light sensitive cameras can pick up a pretty good image even from a match or a candle or an old oil lamp. So again, why do we spend so much time and money and effort placing lights, moving lights, adjusting lights, and so on? This video is an introduction to the basic how and why of film and video lighting. If you've ever been camping and told ghost stories at night, you've probably done something like this where you put a flashlight under your chin to create weird, scary faces. And this is basically the same thing that we're doing when we do film and video lighting, is we're positioning lights from different angles and distances to achieve different effects and to do what we call sculpting with light. That is, creating shapes on film using light and shadow areas. And sometimes we do it to create very dramatic types of effects, and other times, more often, we are trying to achieve more subtle and more naturalistic effects with light. Here I am sitting in my apartment with just a little bit of light coming through the window, and I've been able to get a fairly acceptable image by opening the iris all the way up and raising the ISO. So what's the problem? Why can't I just work with this? Well, first of all, the image is pretty dull. The colors are dull. There's not much contrast or shaping with light. And the biggest problem is the ISO has been raised so high that the image is kind of noisy and grainy, and that's not good. So what we need to do is add some light to this situation. Now we have light. We have a lot of light. Too much light. It's blinding me. I've been able to turn down my gain so we have a much sharper image. But obviously this is not an attractive look. It's really harsh lighting. The contrast between the bright areas and the shadow areas is really extreme. And so what can we do? Well, the first thing is we can soften the light by adding what's called diffusion. When I put it in front of the light, it does a nice job of reducing the amount of light and making it softer. I can take off my sunglasses now. And this is a good start. And what we want to do now is start carefully placing lights around the subject from nice angles and softening them and controlling the distance and the brightness and so on to create a well-balanced look and a naturalistic kind of look. One of the most common types of naturalistic lighting is called three-point lighting, which is done with three separate lights. The first of the lights is called the key light. It's placed at about a 45-degree angle in front of the subject, and it does a great job of highlighting part of the face and leaving the other part of the face in shadows. But these shadows are quite dark, and so it's a very harsh, contrasty image, and it might be appropriate for an intense drama or mystery story of some kind. But for most purposes, this is a little too dramatic, a little too extreme. So what we want to do is fill in this part of the face with a little bit of light, not as bright as this light, so we have what's called the fill light, which is at about a 45-degree angle to the other side and diffused and a little bit more distant, so that we still have a little bit of sculpting here, some difference between the bright side of the face and the darker side of the face. So this is looking pretty good. But the image is still not as vibrant as it might be. And part of the problem here is parts of my head are starting to blend with the background. My graying hair helps make it pop out. But we could make it pop and differentiate from the background a little more through something called the backlight or the hair light, which is placed up over my head on a boom directed towards the back of my head. And when I turn this on, you can see how it really separates my head from the background. And you might recognize this as the classic Hollywood style or TV style lighting with three lights So just to be clear about what each light is doing, let's look at them one at a time. Here is just the backlight, and this would be perfect if you're doing an interview with somebody in a witness protection program, right? So that's just the backlight. And here is just the fill light. And finally, just the key light. So key, fill, and back. That's 3-point lighting. One of the reasons why films and TV shows are quite often shot in studios is because filmmakers want total control over light. They want to start with a dark room and then add lights one by one and control everything about those lights. Now, out on location and out in the real world, it's a different story because there's already light there that you have to deal with, and that seems like a good thing. Yes, but it also introduces a lot of complications, and one of them has to do with color temperature. Now, right now, my apartment is being filled with daylight, and the picture looks pretty good, but I want to accentuate parts of my face. So I'm going to add a key light. So I'm turning on my key light, and right away we notice we have a problem. The light looks way too orange. And unless this is supposed to be like a sunset scene, it doesn't look right. And why is this? Well, this is a traditional hot light, what's called a tungsten light, and it is balanced for around 32K indoor type tungsten lighting, which most movie lights are balanced to. And it is mismatched with the daylight coming through the windows. So we have to make an adjustment. So what I've done now is reset my white balance to 32K to match the tungsten lights. But as you can see, things look even worse because the daylight coming in is making me look really blue, almost dead, right? So this will not do at all. But as you can see, when I start adding the lights in, yeah, the white balance is correct for these tungsten lights, but we're still getting all this blue light coming in, and there's a mismatch going on. So what can we do? Well, we have to make a decision. Either we need to go all 32K or all 56K so that everything will match up. And we have two choices for doing that. We could either put big amber gels over the windows to turn the 56K light into 32K light. And they do this on major motion pictures. But that's a big deal. You need really big gels. The simpler way is to put blue gels over the tungsten lights to make them a bluish color. Okay, what I've done now is I put blue gels on all of the lights and I reset the color temperature to 56K. And just looking at this image, I don't think you'd ever guess that there are these blue gels on all of these lights. And this really demonstrates the fact that outdoor light really is very blue compared to indoor light. Now, of course, if you use LED lights, most LED lights these days have the ability to change color temperature by turning a dial, which is very convenient, and then you don't need gels. However, a lot of filmmakers still feel that tungsten lights have a more natural look than most LED lights, so they continue to use tungsten lights, and filmmakers will carry blue gels to cool down the color temperature of their tungsten lights. And they also often carry green gels for use when you're mixing with fluorescent light, which often has a kind of a green tint to it. Even when we're working outdoors, we have to be thinking about light. And indeed, filmmakers will do all sorts of things to manipulate and get creative with light outdoors, even on beautiful sunny days like today. As you can see, the sun is acting just like a giant key light, shining a really bright light on this side of the face and leaving this side in pretty dark shadows. And it's a pretty harsh look. So to make it less harsh, we use the same tool that we use with any other light. We use diffusion. And I can hold this up, and it does a good job of softening the light shining on my face. And on major motion pictures, you will see gigantic diffusers being set up on stands to soften the light on the actors. The other strategy is to fill in some light to create a fill light. And we can either do that with an artificial light, like this portable LED light, but you need some pretty powerful lights to compete with the sun.
The other simpler strategy is to use a reflector, which is like a mirror, and you put that on the opposite side of the sun and try to position it so it fills in a little bit of light there on the side of the face. And you need a good lighting grip to hold this thing so it doesn't wobble around in the wind, or it can be placed on a stand. So all the same basic principles apply to outdoor light as to indoor light.
In this video, I've mostly been showing you the end results of my lighting setups, and I thought you might like to have a look at the behind the scenes of how these lights have practically taken over my whole apartment just for this simple lighting demo. Here's my key light, my fill light, up there my backlight, and of course a microphone boom for my voice. You can just imagine how elaborate lighting setups must get on major motion pictures where they have many actors who move around from place to place and all have to be lit consistently throughout a whole scene. Lighting can be kind of intimidating at first, but once you start to understand the basic principles of it, you can really get excited about the fun you can have and the creative possibilities of lighting for film and video.